Hello, all the viewers and all the reviewers here on LinkedIn for this week's hashtag debate show. Before we dive super duper deep, I originally was going to make this show about bartering, which I think is going to be a very juicy topic for a future show. Stay tuned. I want to give a shout out to Aaron Gang, who was going to be our amazing co-host. So if you're looking for photography in Chicago, shout out to Aaron. He's wonderful. With that, this show, if you've seen it before, it's all about getting people to debate the controversial topics. And in this case, on LinkedIn, it's business related things that come up. It's topics that maybe don't necessarily, I'll give you a spoiler here, don't necessarily have a clear winner, lose. There's a lot of gray. And maybe my point with all these shows is to emphasize there's a lot of gray with a lot of different topics that we're going to tackle in this series. Okay, I think there's a lot of times where it's like, you're right and you're wrong, but like there's really a middle. And so this debate show comes from a passion of mine, a little bit in conflict resolution to help different people from different perspectives learn from each other and communicate in a way that they can both understand what each brings to the table. And this topic is no different. And originally, like I said, it was going to be about bartering, but I wanted to be extra mindful of the times that we're living in. We're living in this wartime situation, and Ukraine is happening, and there's always something going on that the world has their eye on. So this week's topic is about debating whether a business can really leverage the war on Ukraine for marketing purposes. And if I can humor myself, there was an example this week that I saw. This is one that I just saw like a few hours ago before this show. This is a parcel company being like, hey, you can send care packages through us, to go to the people in the war. There's a lot of different ideas here. So what happens on this show is that people chime in with their comments. Some of you have already commented and shared your insights from earlier last week. Some of you have tagged me in other people's posts. Some stuff I've seen other people talk about in other people's forums. This topic has been happening a lot, so I wanted to make sure we were timely here. So if you have thoughts on this, add it into the comments below, and I will pull them up in here and throw them into this conversation. So with that, I see a few of you are in here. Good to see you. I'm curious to know who's here, but I love it. With that, there's some juicy stuff happening here. One of the big on fire, juiciest things that happened is my amazing speaker coach, Catherine Johns, tagged me in a post this week where one of her contacts, and this is a very strong perspective here. One of her contacts was like, who's making the rules about what we can and cannot post on LinkedIn? It was very, very juicy. I'm going to share it with you here because I think it was super juicy. I'm going to see if I can summarize this for you. So here's the post, right? This guy is very frustrated about people being annoyed that people are not as, he hates that people are being annoyed that people are still in the business world, still promoting, still taking action. He's like, nobody can make the rules in this situation. I don't know if you agree with that. Are there rules? Should there be rules? That's honestly one of the points of this topic. Should there be rules? Should companies be all changing their logos? Is it worth something? I don't know. And he gets very, very annoyed. And he tells you here that you should just unfollow somebody who's doing things that annoy you or trying to dictate what things happen, right? So Catherine tags me in here because she knows I'm doing this debate topic. And she says, yeah, there's some people who lay down the rules and she doesn't have time to argue. She just like blocks them, right? And so I chime in here a little bit too. I chime in a little bit more being like, there are some limits, right? If somebody's exploiting the war, shouldn't they be is there like a reasonable amount of calling out that should happen? I don't know. TBD. He comes back and he's like, his argument is like, you got to focus on your business goals. Who are your clients? Who are your prospects? You got to focus on the people that matter to you. And I'm like, well, that's an interesting point. And then my lovely new BFF, Bruce over here, said kind of what I didn't actually reply yet, but what I really appreciate. It's like businesses take political positions. Some make sense and others are relevant to your offering. Sure, some people's businesses might have a reason to talk politics. If you want to alienate existing and potential customers, you're free to do so. Just don't complain about the backlash. As somebody who did a recent podcast, maybe like a year ago with another show that also was like, I'm going to say what I want and I'm going to do what I want. Like that was his vibe. I was like, if that's your audience, great. But keep in mind the people that you actually like and you may appreciate may also be rubbed the wrong way. You don't have to please everybody, but there is something to that, right? And some people are going to stick around and some people will leave. So I don't know what you think of this guy's whole situation, but it was very, very interesting. And I appreciate Catherine sending this to me. It was definitely something that I wasn't totally expecting. Definitely something different. But there was another angle here that I super duper appreciate. And it's another one from another amazing human that I adore. Let me share what happened. So I don't know who this Brooklyn Nash is, but my amazing contact Tracy commented on this post. Suddenly 5-day-old posts on my feeds. The LinkedIn algorithm isn't keen on talking about LinkedIn. So maybe LinkedIn, he suggests maybe LinkedIn is taking a perspective on this. And you can already see some people have changed their logos. But here's what I really appreciate about what Tracy said. I'm going to read her comment. I saw that too, but I wonder if it's more that users are afraid of posting anything other than content about Ukraine today. This is about the situation that's been going on here. I made a mistake on Friday when voicing my frustration about anything other than content about the war. And when we do that, we make it hard for people to know what to say in fear of being called out. I think what Tracy's saying here is a really interesting thing that I think we felt also when COVID started, is that like nobody really knew what to say. Like I have lots of friends, and I think I wrote this in my post too, that are scared to talk about anything outside the war and are really nervous about it. And, or like COVID or whatever, nobody really knew what to say, right? Because it's like this, like, you know, are we talking about it? Are we not talking about it? And then there's other populations that will talk about it all day, but it's delicate, right? And that's potentially maybe why LinkedIn might not be having as much content being posted. Even me, like I was like, can I talk about business things in a situation like this? I'm not so sure. Yeah, so there's a lot of thoughts on this that just spark my curiosity. Yeah, it's really tricky. It's really tricky. And I don't know, like, am I guilty of this? Right. I'm talking about this subject on here, and it makes me just a smidge nervous, right? It makes me a smidge nervous. I'm like, you know, but also too, I'm like, how can I talk about anything else? I realize this is hitting some people who are watching the news every day, and it's hitting them very, very differently than it's hitting me on a regular basis, you know? So anyway, it's a tricky topic. I don't have all the answers, but what I do appreciate is that everyone who has shared some perspective is adding to this kind of conversation. I see we've got the amazing let's see, we got Matt Rouse in the house. He actually just your ready position on paid that. I love it. So Matt Rouse just wrote a book that's coming out eventually soon, and I'm very lucky to know about it ahead of time. But I'm so glad to have you here. There's a lot of different perspective here, but when we can illuminate each other's voices, it's going to be really, really interesting. So I'm going to go back to the post that we shared earlier this week, because we had some really interesting thoughts in here from some other folks. So Margaret was talking about number 6. So the number 6 post that I wrote in here is about, I'm a Middle Easterner. I'm Moroccan and Iranian, right? And there was an interaction I had with someone recently, and he was sharing with me how he wondered how it's okay for, well, like Ukrainians are getting a lot of voice, right? But when something bad happens in the Middle East, they don't get as much voice. They don't get as much support. And maybe there's some sort of racial tension there, that people are more willing to support someone who's perceived as more white than somebody who's from the Middle East. And I was like, interesting. Am I a political knowledge person that has studied all the politics like a genius? I don't know. Can I say? I don't know. It's tricky. So I don't know what to say about all of that, but I think Margaret had some really interesting points. Margaret is an amazing designer, and I am a big fan. And they're at Ford. She's at Ford, and she's amazing. Oh, and this is interesting. I don't see, this is a quote from someone else that she's quoting. I don't see how this invasion is much different than the U.S. invading, overthrowing a free elected government, occupying Iraq for 20 years. I mean, there's a point to be had, and as somebody who studied education, oftentimes the perspective of whoever is telling the story is going to come out first and foremost, you know, and in a lot of cases, it's the victory of the United States or whatnot. If you're here in the United States, I know Matt's in Canada right now. Matt says, my worry is brands saying, I support Ukraine, but doing nothing, just paying lip service can hurt your brand a lot, and not just on this topic. Oh my gosh, Matt, bless you. I think it's Women's History Month. Last month was Black History Month. I feel like every social media manager is like, yes, talk about it, right? But every person knows, especially if you're a minority in a lot of different ways, that like women are still paid less. If you're Black, you're getting paid less. If you're a Hispanic woman, you're getting paid even less. There is, you know, a lot of companies that say we're going to pay fair wages, and like, are they though? Like, you know, they say like, hey, we stand up for this, but you're right, they don't actually take the action to do something about it, right? And that's what, like, it's very disappointing. But you're hitting on something huge, right? There's a lot of easy ways to just change a logo, to change a post or a comment or something, but what's actually going to happen, right? It is a tricky situation, Matt. I am so glad you brought that up. It is so true, and it's just interesting. Oh, the other thing, I'm going to pull in another comment in here. Fanny shared earlier this week. She's in she spent a lot. She's European. She's not in. I don't think she's in Europe right now. But you see it, you feel it differently when you're over there. Educate on how different ways you can help. There's interesting. There's a comment about social media and like how that much can help. And there's a lot of digital activism that does it work? Does it not? I think that's a whole other topic that we can have here, right? And I tagged a quote that I got from the amazing Dr. Reverend Jamie Washington. One of the things I think she pointed out, right, is an individual, like we have to prioritize where we put our energy. And maybe this is the as we wrap up this show, maybe this is the point we need to take, right? There's so many causes in the world to fight for, whether, I was a hospital magician trying to make things a little better for a kid that is in the hospital, or like, doing stuff in the Jewish community here in Chicago to like helping people who need food and shelter. Like there's a million different, there's like global warming related things. There's political things. There's a million different causes to fight for, right? And I know that I can't fight for all of them. But what I really find annoying, honestly, is like, Ukraine, let's talk about Ukraine. I'm so passionate about it. And then like after the Ukraine thing gets off the news, Ukraine still has issues. Are people going to still work with Ukraine? I don't know. They forget about it. When it's on in the news, people don't do anything to try to help. It's like once that media moment is gone, the people who cared about it go away. Yet so many people are probably still going to be fighting for this cause long after, and they're not going to have their voices amplified. We see this in the LGBT equality movement. There was a moment where everyone's like, yeah, let's go. And then it was like, okay, let's make trans voices elevated. Trans folks still have tons of problems that we need to fight and support for. But what I think Fanny is hitting at, I'm going to go back to Fanny's comments here, is that, you know what? Maybe we need to prioritize our efforts into our causes. Granted, there's ways to work together, and ideally it's going to make the world a better place. But I'm going to leave you with this quote too. Leave you-ish with this quote is that Dr. Reverend Jamie Washington said it's about leaving the world better than when you found it. Is that we are not going to solve Ukraine. At least I'm not here on a LinkedIn live video. But maybe this conversation will be a little bit more illuminating. I don't know. Do I have the answers? No. Maybe if we all learn from each other, like we've learned from Matt, we've learned from some people who've engaged in here. There's no right answer, right? Trials and errors is what Fanny says. Shouting out some other good people. But there's a lot of goodies that we can discuss, and we could probably talk about this topic for hours and hours. Oh, here, most recent. We got all these comments here. Let me remove this here. This is a complicated subject, right? And as somebody who lives in the marketing world, if somebody asked me, Shiley, what would you tell a client about this topic? One of my clients right now is launching a book, and he is like, can I promote my book, or do I need to keep the somber tone when it comes to Ukraine? And I think that answer is different for different people. And I think this goes back to what we were hearing about, if your brand is a brand that has to make comments on this, maybe that makes sense to comment and to share. And maybe it does make sense to be mindful of it. I think some people, again, are feeling it in a different way than maybe some business people who are out there still hunting and doing their business thing. It's tricky. If there's a point to the show, is that it's tricky. But like what I would tell a client is like, if that's you and that's something you would say to a room full of the people that love and trust you, and you feel like that's something that you're proud to share, then that's you, right? Do I feel like I have an educated opinion or thought about Ukraine to solve their problems? No. Am I nervous to post anything extra promotional? Maybe, because I know some of my friends are taking this in a different way than I am. And it's complicated. Am I doing enough? I don't know. Is this helping? I don't know. But I hope that this left you with some things to think about and reflect on how you talk about this kind of stuff. So with that, I so appreciate everyone who's chimed in, who shared answers today, who shared resources throughout the week about their thoughts on this, who's tagged me in posts about the topic, who shared. We had someone who recently shared this post to a bunch of folks in the political science world, which I am not a PhD in political science. I can't tell you how this crisis works. I don't know everything. But if I can get some folks to hear each other out and figure out how to make the energy of LinkedIn and maybe the business world flow with the knowledge of what's happening in the world, because this could affect all of us, right? There's a ripple effect here. I mean, I know gas prices are interesting. I don't know how I feel about that, but we'll figure it out. If I can leave you, I keep saying this, if I can leave you on this, we each carry a piece of the story about how we may or may not need to behave in a business context when it comes to talking in a time of war. And ideally, if we have a room in which we can share and trust each other with those voices, maybe we can all learn something from that experience. So with that, thank you, Matt, for your kind words and your support. I'm so excited for your book to come out. I'm going to close on my social media quote. I don't know. Shoot, social media is about the people, not about your business. Provide for the people, and maybe the people will provide for you. This has been #debate with Shiley Hakimian of yoursocialmediasherpa.com. I'll see you on the interwebs. Bye.